Okay, folks, welcome to my review of Cyberfrog, Dark Harvest, a book I'm calling An Island of Misfit Ideas. Dark Harvest is the work of writer and artist Ethan Van Sciver, with colors by Kyle Ritter and letters by Eric Weathers. The cover of the book, judging by the signatures, is primarily the work of legendary Incredible Hulk artist Dale Keown, with finishes by Kelsey Shannon. I'm not terribly fond of the cover because of how it seems to minimize the Vespers threat rather than maximize it. It's almost like the Dark Harvest is supposed to mean, I'm in a dark mood now because all I was able to harvest was this one tiny bug. Before I move on from the cover, you might be wondering why the issue is numbered 2.9. It's because the events of Dark Harvest occur immediately before the events of Cyberfrog 3, Red Extermination. It was because of this that I almost decided not to review Dark Harvest. Should it really be considered a standalone book in its own right? But then I saw Ethan describe the book this way.
I made Dark Harvest into its whole own bridge book. I want Red Extermination to start off with violence and fighting right away. I don't want Cyberfrog and Heather. I don't want that reunion scene to happen at the beginning of Red Extermination, but it needs to be on paper. So I just made all of that stuff Dark Harvest. It's its own bridge book. It gets you set up and positioned and ready to jump right into Red Extermination, which is nothing but violence. As soon as you break into it, it's violence and gore.
From that information, it seems that Dark Harvest and Red Extermination are intended to be two very different books, which to me means it's okay to judge them separately and see how each stands up individually. Now, before I get into the contents of Dark Harvest, I want to bring up a complaint that I've heard here and there about the book, which is that Dark Harvest is a very slender book. This is Wrecked Planet, and this is Dark Harvest, and they are not the same. That's been leading some people to complain, I paid $20 for 20 pages? But let's be clear about how Dark Harvest evolved over time. At each major stage of Dark Harvest's evolution, there was a difference in how many pages of original story, how many preview pages, and how many duplicate pages showing just line art were included in that $20 we were being asked to pay. The first iteration of Dark Harvest was 4 pages of original story that was supposed to expand upon a scene in Wrecked Planet, where Lily wanders into a cave looking for her missing father. She screams, but what does she see? We don't know. Those 4 original pages were supposed to explain what she saw, and then on top of those 4 pages, you'd get 6 preview pages copied from the beginning of Cyberfrog 3 Red Extermination. And then after that, you'd get those same 10 pages repeated, but only showing the line art, no colors, dialogue, or captions, so that art fans could go gaga over Ethan's art by itself. I shouldn't have to tell you that I was less than impressed, so I'll let Ethan tell you.
Mike Partika blasted me. He said, he's like, you got to do better than this. Why would I, for 4 pages? So I went, yeah, you're right.
So I moved the needle a little. The next iteration of Dark Harvest was a massive improvement. The story was expanded to a respectable 10 original pages, with 10 preview pages to be copied from Cyberfrog 3, and no more messing about with line art. This is the point where I bought in. But wait, there were even more changes on the way. I don't actually know for sure how many other iterations there were before publishing, but I can tell you that the final iteration of Dark Harvest turned out to be 20 pages of original story plus a 4-page bridge of sorts by Ethan Van Sciver that connects Cyberfrog 3 with the upcoming Cyberfrog prequel series, Cyberfrog Frog Meets World. Now, these 4 pages are not copied from Cyberfrog 3. These are original comic book pages written and drawn by Ethan Van Sciver that make up a kind of a 4-page hostess ad for Frog Meets World. It's cute when you realize what he's actually done in bringing back this style of ads. But because anyone who's followed along with the book's development was expecting Cyberfrog 3 preview pages, and because there's literally the word preview at the top of each bridge page, it really misleads you into thinking you're reading Cyberfrog 3 pages, and it's annoying to realize you've actually been reading 4 pages of throwaway material that nobody would ever bother to reprint. Or would they? Anyway, the point of all this history of the book's evolution is to show that we were originally offered 4 pages of original story for $20, and we ended up getting 5 times that amount, which is not too shabby. Even if you were late on the buy-in and you only expected 10 pages for $20, you should be overjoyed to get double that, right? Well, not if you were a late buy-in under the Cyberfrog Dark Harvest Last Chance campaign, because then you would have been under the impression that you were getting a 32-page book, not a 24-page book with 8 pages of mostly ads. So it all depends on when you bought in. If you bought in when I did, when the book was going to be 20 pages or less, then you'll be overjoyed. But if you got in later than that, you'll probably come away feeling kind of screwed, because you were. But enough of all that. On to the interiors. Now, considering that Ethan turned down my offer to look over the finished copy of Dark Harvest for free before it went to print, I really hoped that I wouldn't open the book to find a mistake right off the bat. But that's exactly what we get with this chapter page. Her father is missing. And what's the first image we see? Lily, next to an old man. Hey, she found her dad. Okay, mystery solved. Lily found her dad. Okay, the guy's not actually her dad, but that's the first thing we're going to think. Even if you've seen her dad before back in Heartsick Horror when his long hair was clearly brown and not white, that doesn't mean time spent with the Vespers couldn't have whitened it up. And why would we think this guy was anyone else? There are no other memorable missing characters to guess from. Plus, this whole story was written to tell us what happens to Lily when she goes into a cave looking for her dad. She even screams, "Dad!" when entering the cave. Our most natural guess for why Lily screamed is that she found her dad and he was not in great shape. And this image just seems to confirm our suspicions. She finds her dad and he's unnaturally old. Maybe his life force has been harvested from him. This is the kind of path readers' minds are going to be led down, and it's completely wrong. And it's burdensome to a reader to be led down a garden path like that. And it's even worse when it's unintentional, because then the reader thinks, oh, I got led down a garden path, because you don't know what you're doing. So already we've got a problem here. It would have been better just to not have a picture here at all, or have a picture of just Lily being terrified, something generic. The actual chapter opens with Lily being carried by two Vespers to who knows where. They seem particularly uncaring toward her, and this introduces us to one of the core conceits of the Cyberfrog universe. The Vespers are basically an alien race of social justice warriors who talk a good game about love, caring, empathy, and resistance to all things hateful and murderous, but in reality are exactly the same sociopathic things they claim to oppose. Everything they say has the veneer of love, but is actually the embodiment of malice. The Vespers also have no regard for truth and will lie at every opportunity. Here we learn that when a high-ranking Vespers revealed to Cyberfrog that the Vespers can indeed see red, in contradiction to one of the 4 human rules for survival, always wear red because the Vespers can't see red, it turns out that this Vespers was lying. So, yeah, alien social justice warriors who lie all the time and really don't care about people. It's an interesting paradigm, and it gets old really fast. Thankfully, we're not left to dwell on it long. Instead, we flash back to a moment from Wrecked Planet where Cyberfrog went to chase down some Vespers and left Lily behind. It's about now that I start to realize what threatens to be the unifying concept behind Dark Harvest: communication and the lack thereof. We get the first gist of the concept here when it's clear Lily and Cyberfrog aren't communicating. Lily is communicating with someone else, though. The woman Anne O'Malley, also known as the villain Dystopia, is secretly in mental communication with Lily and guides Lily to take a piece of techno-weaponry off of the defeated villain Spite. Now, in Wrecked Planet, we saw Lily take the glove, but we didn't know she did so at the direction of Dystopia. We just figured Lily saw it and thought, hey, this might come in handy. And then she says, okay, as if to say, okay, let's get this show on the road. Knowing that Dystopia guided her to take the glove, however, presents a problem. Dystopia seems to know what the glove's purpose is, but the only way that could be the case is if she was in communication with the being who had outfitted Spite with the glove, namely Scorpion. And 7 pages later, our suspicions are confirmed. Dystopia is indeed in league with Scorpion, who is trying to adjust his plans to overthrow the Vespers around Cyberfrog's uninformed and clumsy intervention. In this case, the lack of communication between Cyberfrog and Scorpion is gumming up the works of saving humanity. It's at this point that I don't particularly care for where the story is going. First, it would have been nice to have been surprised in learning this connection between Dystopia and Scorpion instead of figuring it out for myself 7 pages ago. But more importantly, it's starting to look like Scorpion might just wind up being the mastermind of humanity's salvation, whereas Cyberfrog just ends up being a tool in Scorpion's arsenal. And that's problematic because one of the complaints I've also heard about the Cyberfrog books in general is that Cyberfrog doesn't really get much of a chance to act like a hero throughout the books. And if Scorpion turns out to be the real orchestrator of victory over the Vespers, it's going to look like Cyberfrog gets shortchanged again from being able to take that heroic posture. But that's projecting ahead. Let's get back to Lily's story, where we find her running through the woods and stumbling upon Dystopia herself, who is out in the forest. She's got her back to Lily, she's manifesting a really scary face and some really wicked sharp long claws for some reason. Maybe that's her true physical form? No, not really. It's just ambiguous artwork screwing with us again. This is actually a representation of dystopia as a mental projection, but unfortunately, there's nothing that really distinguishes her in that way so that we don't assume she's physically there. It's entirely possible that she's just way closer to the camera than Lily is, and that her lower body is blending into the shadows behind her. If we're supposed to recognize that this is actually a mental representation of dystopia instead of her being actually there in the forest, then she should be semi-transparent or something. As it is, she looks too real. Anyway, finally we have Lily reach the cave, and the scene from Wrecked Planet plays out, and now we finally get to see what happens next. She finds her dad, right? No, instead she finds all the people who accompanied her dad the last time her dad went out to forage in a nearby town as part of a Red Roster foraging team. Now, I'm sorry, but I have to call BS on the lighting throughout this scene. Note that Otis, the guy who grabbed Lily, has not moved from the beginning of the scene to its current point, and there's nothing to indicate that the lights surrounding them all came on all of a sudden, so Lily in effect has just stumbled into a whole room full of people in a well enough lit room without noticing anybody, except for the one person who actually grabbed her. Come on! I assume someone's going to argue that her eyes needed time to adjust, but if that's the case, we need to hear somebody say that, because all I see is lights galore without any transition whatsoever from the initial state of darkness. Also, can somebody please explain the stick physics here? Otis grabs Lily's hand and Lily's walking stick falls to the inside of his arm, but while he's still got hold of her arm, the stick falls to the outside of their arms. All this time, Lily had a magic walking stick? Anyway, I think I'm going to be saying anyway a lot. Anyway, Lily learns that some of the Vespas are actually vampire bees that use their stingers to drain human brain fluid. Why? No idea. This is probably some sort of meta-reference to how the SJWs in the comics field suck the life out of the truly creative people. But I don't know, and I'm really tired of trying to make parallel associations with the real world. Naturally, Lily is freaked out not only by the brain drain going on in front of her, but also because she's realizing the rule about dressing in red has no effect. But wait, now I'm confused. If the Vespas always lie, and the Vespas said they can see red, then they shouldn't be able to see red. But now Lily realizes they can see red, so doesn't that mean the Vespas were telling the truth? What the heck is right? Although I don't think that's what the heck means in this context, actually. What the heck sounds like the natural conclusion of Lily's confused reaction to the device she took from Spite activating in her backpack. It's not very clear, and it's easy to read that what the heck either way. It doesn't help that the device's dialogue balloon is practically red on red and almost impossible to see. The rest of the chapter is comprised of some more Vespas conversation that closes out this flashback we've been in and takes us back to the beginning of the chapter where Lily is being carried away by a couple of Vespas. Plus, the Vespas are now attacking the human compound in the forest near where Heather and the gravely injured Cyberfrog are. So let's move on from there into Chapter 2. Here we're given a generic picture of Heather Swain. Surely this picture won't be problematic, except when the facing pages join to it, at which point the hair on the left and the hair on the right all seems to blend together. Anyway, we now pick up right from where we left off at the end of Wrecked Planet, where Salamandroid, carrying the heart of his and Cyberfrog's mother Chell Sin with him, has just located Heather and Cyberfrog. Heather uses the heart of Chell Sin to run a damage report on Cyberfrog, which clears up her confusion over why he can't talk. Sal suggests Cyberfrog scribble what he wants to say in the mud, and this is what Cyberfrog writes. Whoa, 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 whoa. Do you see this? Look at Cyberfrog's shoulder. Isn't that cool? Isn't that neat seeing Heather reflected in Cyberfrog's shoulder like that? That is so neat how Ethan got the reflection in there like that. That is really clever. That is impressive. That is so eye-catching. And that's exactly why it needs to go. Ask yourself this question. What is the point of this panel? This is the point of the panel. This is a little flashy doodad that is sucking all the oxygen out of the panel. And there are two other reasons why this doodad needs to go. First, it's redundant. The next panel shows Heather's reaction in detail, so we don't need the smaller reaction shot in Cyberfrog's shoulder. Second, and this is serious because I see a lot of comic book writers struggling with this. As much as possible, have each panel tell its own story. Let's take this page for example. What is the story of panel 1? Cyberfrog delivers a message. What is the story of panel 2? Heather and Salamandroid react to the message. These two panels are two stories on one page. You have to remember, a comic book page is not a unit. It is a sequence of panels. And when you allow each panel to give the reader a distinct impression, it is like giving the reader one experience after another. And the more experiences that you stack up on top of each other, the more the reader feels he's getting his money's worth. And you don't get questions like this. So once you're done constructing your page, get rid of anything that blurs the panel's messages together. Here, you've got some of the second panel's message being received in the first panel. Get rid of it. Let each panel tell its own story. Your readers will thank you for it. Here's another great example of failing to keep ideas in separate panels. Here you have one idea that's smeared over 4 panels featuring the character Megan. Even describing the sequence of panels feels like a run-on sentence. While subtracting a hen from inventory on her calculator and complaining about how this is not how she likes to start her morning, Megan pauses as she realizes the numbers on the TI 108 are fading because even though it's morning, the daylight is fading. That's what readers are going to get out of your smearing the ideas around. Now look at the panels again. Every panel is its own story. Story 1, Megan subtracts a hen from inventory. Story 2, Megan complains about her job. Story 3, Megan is confused that the numbers are fading. Story 4, Megan wonders why it's getting dark. Same 4 panels, but now you're telling 4 stories instead of 1. The more stories you tell in a single book, the more entertained your reader will be. Even the sequence of 2 panels can use some help. Just take the first everyone and move it into the second panel. Now the first panel becomes entirely about Megan's confusion at seeing the Vespis mothership. And the second panel is Megan raising the alarm. It seems like such a small change, but it has such a large impact. Here are a few other miscellaneous thoughts I had while reading the book. First, yes, there are some text errors to fix. For example, here's a segment of a page where the order of the dialogue balloons is unclear. It's easy to mistakenly read in this order instead of the correct order. Another example, these captions all come from the same page, and they're littered with lettering problems. Missing commas, an extra comma, missing emphasis. Keep in mind, Ethan, I offered to catch these things for you for free. You didn't have to see me pointing them out in front of God and everybody. Next, the communication theme doesn't really tie the book together. Yes, the heroes lack communication skills, while the villains seem to have those communication skills, but it's not like anybody really seems to realize this or realize that a change is needed, so this theme isn't teaching anybody any lessons. Now, maybe those lessons are supposed to come in Red Extermination, but as we saw earlier, that's supposed to be the non-stop violence book. I don't suspect any lessons are going to be learned in that one, except for maybe how to kick butt. Third, what even is the Dark Harvest? I thought maybe it was the brain drain, but here we're never told what they're harvesting or why. There actually is another scene in the book where the word harvest is used explicitly, but when I saw what it was referring to, I just thought, really? That's it? I mean, yeah, evil bugs being evil, but that's not even a shock. Why would you even write a book about that? So whatever this titular Dark Harvest is, it's either something undescribed, something underdescribed, or something underwhelming. Last, this issue feels like a patchwork quilt of ideas. You've got Vispa's banner, you've got Dystopia's manipulations, you've got the brain drain, you've got various communications devices, and you've got the continuance of the heroes' reunion from the end of Wrecked Planet. But honestly, it feels like this book is like a drawer Ethan opened and shoved a bunch of ideas in and then shut again. And amazingly, that's even what he said it is.
At this point, it's about what ideas I can't fit in the book and what ideas I have to let go. I mean, that's how much I think about it.
I have spin-off books to contain the ideas that don't fit in the book.
Yeah.
Like, that's what Dark Harvest is.
Dude, you can put your side ideas into a book by itself, but you still need to make that book into a story. And this is not a story. Not by itself, anyway. Maybe when Dark Harvest is paired with Red Extermination, everything will come together and look like a complete volume. But in the future, you really need to give more attention to making sure each of your books is a story in itself instead of something that's just thrown together from spare ideas. As much as you love Dick Masterson's critique of ISOM #1, I don't think you listened. So now it's time for the overall score. Here are all the books I've reviewed and scored before, and I'm putting Dark Harvest at a 4.0 largely due to its chock-a-block nature. Again, there's nothing wrong with taking your spare ideas and dumping them into a separate book, but you still have to make sure that that book is a story, and Dark Harvest is not it. Next time, figure out a theme. Make a narrative that fits that theme, and give your readers something better than an island of misfit ideas. Thank you for watching my review of Cyberfrog 2.9 Dark Harvest. If you found the information in this video helpful, please do like the video and then subscribe so that you'll be notified of my next review. What's on the docket? It's the one you've all been waiting for, Rippaverse's ISOM number 3. I'm Mike Bartica. Thank you again for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will talk to you later.